USD Tether is going to trigger a massive crash in exactly 3 days, pulling Bitcoin down with it. These are the massive statements you're hearing more and more on X, and there really seems to be panic brewing here if Tether gets delisted in the EU in 3 days, meaning it will be taken down from many platforms. Due to the MiCA regulation, Tether is facing major restrictions, and now there's really panic setting in. Here, they're even talking about the end of crypto. We'll take a look at what's really going on, whether we should be panicking or if this is just a lot of hot air. They're even talking about the end of crypto here. We're going to take a look at what's really behind this, whether we should be panicking or if it's all just hot air. They're even talking about a collapse of the Bitcoin market. It's being said that USDT, the stablecoin from Tether, is going to crash on December 30th. They're even talking about a collapse of the Bitcoin market. Here it says USDT, so the stablecoin here from Tether will crash on December 30th. In 3 days, Tether will be removed from the EU centralized exchanges, meaning all centralized trading platforms. In 2022, FTX and C collapsed. The market fell by 70% in 2012. The end of USDT is equivalent to the end of Bitcoin, and this will create panic. Here, they're even comparing this to Celsius and FTX. Back then, with the big scandal surrounding FTX, I don't expect a massive sell-off this time. I'm quite relaxed about it. A lot of panic is being created, but in the end, it could just lead to some minor turbulence. However, there's definitely not going to be a 70% crash in the Bitcoin market. Tether and Bitcoin are very closely connected. I'm feeling pretty relaxed about the whole situation. A lot of panic is being created, but in the end, it could just lead to some minor turbulence or something like that. However, the Bitcoin market is definitely not going to crash by 70%. The very important thing is that Tether and Bitcoin are very, very closely linked here. You need to know that Tether is probably the biggest on-ramp to Bitcoin, meaning Tether is essentially a stablecoin, which means that one USDT always represents $1. So you basically have a $1 representation on the blockchain in the form of Tether USDT. Many traders don't just go in and out of Bitcoin through their accounts. They do it through stablecoins like Tether. That's why it's so relevant for Bitcoin. There's been a lot of Tether FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, for a long time. For several years now, people have been saying that Tether is going to collapse because it's not backed. There could be all sorts of shady stuff going on. But in my opinion, it doesn't look like Tether is about to collapse. However, there are also other voices that see the situation in a much more critical light. Here it says, for example, Tether hasn't minted anything for over 2 weeks, so no new Tether coins have been created and nobody knows why. This has sent shockwaves through the crypto markets. Tomorrow, Tether will officially be banned in Europe. Well, it's not actually tomorrow, but on December 30th, as far as I know, because it refuses to meet the regulatory requirements. As a result, hundreds of exchanges will be removing Tether, the glue, that holds the markets together, from their listings. The ticking time bomb is about to explode. Blatant accusations, and yes, you really have to say that Tether is really a relevant player here, and that is always good and bad at the same time. On the one hand, it brings a massive amount of capital into Bitcoin, but on the other hand, Tether has also been bringing uncertainty and fad and a lot of speculation into Bitcoin for years. And if something were to happen with Tether, if Tether isn't backed or similar, it could lead to panic selling. Many assume if all of this is going to be banned, there will be a panic sell-off like a bank run on Tether, where everyone rushes to sell their Tether coins. Why not now, so the panic selling would start? Many think on December 30th, oh crap, Tether is no longer listed anywhere in the EU. Quickly flee to Bitcoin or sell Tether before delisting. If people flee to Bitcoin, it strengthens it as Tether liquidity flows into Bitcoin. Many think that on December 30th, Tether is no longer listed in the EU, causing a rush to Bitcoin or Tether sale. Moving to Bitcoin strengthens it by redirecting Tether liquidity. However, this might weaken Tether. The fear is Tether depegging, losing US dollar backing. This happened with other stablecoins, especially algorithmic, causing instability. A known case is the stablecoin from the surfer. And if people were to flee into Bitcoin, it would actually strengthen Bitcoin, because then the liquidity that is now stored in Tether would flow into Bitcoin, which would actually help Bitcoin. Alternatively, it might weaken Tether, and many fear a depegging, indicating Tether might not be backed by a US dollar now. This occurred with other stablecoins, especially algorithmic ones, which faced odd situations and depegged, losing stability. A notable case is the Surfing Doctor stablecoin. It also got depegged, and it went downhill. It lost trust, and depegging was irreversible. Many assume Tether could face a similar scenario in 3 days, affecting Bitcoin similarly. However, Bitcoin might not be harmed. It could be strengthened. That would then get depegged, and that's when it all started going downhill. The trust in that thing just kept eroding, and the depegging couldn't be reversed. Now, a lot of people are assuming that a similar scenario is coming for Tether in 3 days, and that it will affect Bitcoin in the same way. But I could even imagine, under certain scenarios, that Bitcoin will not only do harm, but can even strengthen. But yes, in general, it will probably weaken Bitcoin maybe a little bit or something like that, but definitely not trigger a 70% drop, at least from my estimation here. Jason from the All In podcast, one of the most relevant podcasts in the world, or the most clicked podcast, which also always attacks Bitcoin, has of course followed up and said that Tether is wildly used, and have I understood that correctly? They're making billions even though they're banned in numerous jurisdictions, and they've become the standard for the darkest transactions. Plus, they still haven't passed an audit by a major firm, even though they hold tens of billions of dollars. Well, you have to give him some credit. There are still, let's say, disputes about all the audits. But Tether has at least published some papers, although I don't think they were from an independent auditor. They've shown that they're even over-collateralized because Tether is one of the most profitable, if not the most profitable company in the world. They're using their gains to buy government bonds, but they're also buying Bitcoin and various other assets. I believe they even invest in real estate. According to their own statements, they're over-collateralized, meaning they have more assets backing them than they actually need. And there was now also the scenario that, for example, Coinbase removed Tether as a stablecoin for regulatory safety due to uncertainty. Platforms are vulnerable in gray areas, and Tether is kind of in that gray area now. That's why Coinbase removed Tether in Europe due to MiCA regulation, lacking approval for exchanges. You can hold it on a hardware wallet and trade peer-to-peer. You can keep it on a wallet, but cashing out on exchanges might be tricky, more to unfold. USDT has been removed because, due to the MiCA regulation, Tether is no longer clearly regulated in Europe, and doesn't have the approval to be listed on exchanges anymore. You can still hold it on a hardware wallet, no problem there. You can also trade it peer-to-peer or whatever, so you can definitely keep it on a hardware wallet without any issues. But it might get tricky to cash out Tether on exchanges, and I think there's still a lot more to unfold. TED has announced work on the regulation for MiCA to release a USDT European version. Unclear if it will happen, but I've heard from Tether's CEO, name unclear, that this is the plan. They aim for proper regulation in Europe. For now, less or no Tether trading in Europe, but it might return with regulatory clarity. Conversely, voices say there's FUD around USDT and stablecoins, but all is fine. Reserves are verified. The risk is a US political shift, like Trump taking a hard stance against stablecoins. Currently, Bitcoin and stablecoin regulation are advancing in the U.S. There's no Tether trading in Europe anymore, but it could come back at some point once there's regulatory clarity. On the flip side, there are voices saying that there's currently a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt around USDT and stablecoins, but everything is fine. There are verified reserves. The only risk we face is a political shift in the US, like if Donald Trump were to take a hard stance against stablecoins or something. Donald Trump isn't really going hard on stablecoins or anything, but it looks like not only is Bitcoin regulation being pushed forward in the US, but stablecoin regulation is also moving ahead. You have to ask what Europe is doing, why they're so against Bitcoin and stablecoins. I dislike stablecoins, as it replicates fiat money. Stablecoins can devalue and be censored. There are claims Tether blacklists coins. Blacklisted coins can't move. Tether lacks deposit insurance. Banks offer deposit insurance in Germany. Many prefer bank accounts. For large holdings, Tether is good. For those without US dollar access, there's no deposit insurance with Tether. With a bank account, you still have deposit insurance up to a certain amount here in Germany, which is why a lot of people still prefer having a bank account or something like that. But if you have larger holdings, Tether can actually be a good option, especially for people who, for example, don't have direct access to US dollars. Do not have access to US dollars directly, e.g. Tether can be used, offering pros and cons. It bridges hyper-Bitcoinization but might also strengthen the dollar, which is why the US supports stablecoins to boost global dollar demand. Tether buys US Treasury bonds, enhancing dollar demand. More stablecoins could emerge. However, stablecoins lack censorship resistance and true value, being $1 replicas. Yet they offer opportunities, as US dollars are better than hyperinflated currencies. This can promote Bitcoin's price but won't lead to a crypto collapse soon. I might be wrong, so feel free to correct me, but this is my view based on current knowledge. When the demand for stablecoins goes up, the demand for US dollars goes up too. What happens is that fewer and fewer people are buying US Treasury bonds. And what's interesting about Tether, at least from the US perspective, is that Tether has become one of the largest buyers of US Treasury bonds. Every time they mint new Tether coins, they have to buy T-bills, which are short-term US Treasury bonds, and that boosts the demand for the US dollar. So it's clear that Tether can really be a key player in making the dollar stronger. Just imagine if we had more and more stablecoin offerings everywhere. Larry Fink and BlackRock are also talking about how stablecoins are the future. But like I said, I see all of this a bit critically with all the stablecoins, especially the fact that you don't have censorship-resistant money and can still be censored. You don't really have a store of value. It's just a $1 replica. But on the other hand, you have to see the opportunities because for many countries, having US dollars is still better than having some hyperinflated shitcoin. That's something to consider, and you also have to see that it can promote Bitcoin, at least when it comes to price. But we also have to be clear that this isn't going to lead to a collapse. We're not going to see the ultimate Bitcoin and crypto apocalypse in 3 days or anything like that. I could be wrong here, so feel free to correct me if I'm seeing this wrong. But that's just my take based on what I know and the conclusions I can draw right now. One more thing I almost forgot to mention, which a lot of people don't consider, is that the biggest stablecoin market isn't even in Europe. I could be wrong here, so feel free to correct me if I'm seeing this wrong. But that's just my take based on what I know and the conclusions I can draw right now. What I also need to add, which I almost forgot, is that a lot of people don't consider this. The biggest stablecoin market isn't even in Europe. I mean, Europe isn't a completely irrelevant market, but the bigger markets are definitely the U.S, or if you want, China or other international markets. So Europe does have some volume and all, but it's really not comparable to the U.S. If stablecoins were to be banned here in the US, I'd really say, hey folks, we need to be careful about what happens next, because that could lead to some crazy situations. Tether is by far the largest stablecoin, and if you look at market capitalization, Tether is way up there at the top. And that's ultimately the important thing. This only affects Europe. In the US, everything just keeps going as it is. The only thing that's changing is that, for example, now Coinbase, which is actually a US company, is effectively banning Tether here. In Europe, but in the US, you can still trade it and all. And that's why I see relatively few issues here. If you want to buy Bitcoin, I've got a link down below to 21 Bitcoin, the easiest way to buy Bitcoin in Europe. Super easy, safe, and straightforward. You can set up savings plans and a lot more. With the code Bitcoin Hotel, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. I'm signing off here from El Salvador. Let me know if you're feeling panicked or if you're taking it easy. Until then, peace out.